Comes from Deputies John Curran, Alan Kelly and Kevin O'Keefe, and it relates to the closure of Harold's Cross Greyhound Racing Track. Deputy Curran.
Minister, earlier this month the gates of Harold's Cross were locked, the traps were removed and other equipment removed, and after almost 90 years greyhound racing at Harold's Cross came to an end. Last week Deputy Jackie Cahill and myself and others met owners, breeders, those who had an interest in the industry and those who used the facilities at Harold's Cross. They were neither consulted nor support this decision. And the lack of support from the industry in this decision is evident in the protests that you see at Shelbourne Park. We're told that the Irish Greyhound Board made this decision because they have a debt and they want to effectively sell the lands at Harold's Cross to pay the debt. The primary cause of the debt was the overspend on the development in Limerick. Harold's Cross as a racing track is a profitable, successful venture, and in the absence of a wider plan by the Irish Greyhound Board, selling a profitable element of their organisation doesn't make sense and does not enjoy the support of owners, breeders and those involved in the industry. It is a historic and cultural part of life in Dublin for over 90 years, dating back to 1928.
Deputy Alan Kelly.
Thank you, Minister, the decision last week in relation to the sale of Harold's Cross was the last straw for many. Firstly, the board weren't even consulted of Harold's Cross. Secondly, as regards those who have contributed to the industry for generations, they are sick and tired of the way in which the Irish Greyhound Board are running this industry. And frankly speaking, they're running it into the toilet. It's a basket case at this stage. The level of debt is incredible, but also the decision-making process is wrong. And it's now time, Minister, and don't be like your predecessors, many of whom made the same mistakes, of saying that it will sort itself out and they're a separate organisation. It's now time, Minister, for this board to be dismissed, and it's time for this Department of Agriculture to take over the running for an interim period until they get to the bottom of what the hell is going on in this organisation.
Thank you, Deputy O'Keefe.
Minister, on Monday, February 13, 2017, a most disastrous, cowardly and devious act was carried out against the greyhound industry in this country, especially in the Greater Dublin area. Bulldozers have since been sent into Harold's Cross Greyhound Stadium to make it unraceable. Directors at Harold's Cross were not informed. Owners, trainers, breeders were at a loss and continue to be in a state of shock. In the eve of Valentine's Day, there were no talks between any of the stakeholders, just downright acts of scheming, lying and betrayal by those who carried out this. What makes this attack on the industry all the more astonishing is that it was carried out by those who claim to be running the industry. It is these same people at the top level of the Irish Greyhound Board that have brought this great industry to its knees. It is clear that the closure of Harold's Cross is as a result of the appalling decision-making of the Irish Greyhound Board over the past 10 years. Let me be clear, the closure of Harold's Cross Greyhound Track is because of the excessive overspend and the debt that was accumulated during the construction of Limerick Greyhound Track. Harold's Cross is only one of 3 tracks in Ireland to consistently make a profit down through the years. It has had a clear and defined customer base for many years, from a defined proximity.
Thank you, Deputy.
To presume that the customers, breeders, patrons and staff will relocate livelihoods to Shelbourne Park is based on speculation and poor judgment. Shelbourne Park is often more associated with the bigger trainer and the higher calibre of race. It is unlikely that they will now be able to handle or cater for the influx of extra races coming from Harold's Cross.
Thank you, Deputy. We'll be coming
this
back.
will result in livelihoods being destroyed. Come on.
Thank you, Count Corley. Certainly, don't mean to be flippant, but this is certainly one that has had me running around the track for a while. I'm not running away, Deputy, don't you worry. I went and I've tried to engage with everybody as best I can, in fairness. Anyway, Bord na Gan is a commercial state agency responsible for the control, promotion and operation of greyhound racing. In this context, it owns a number of commercial greyhound tracks, including Harold's Cross. The operation of the tracks is a matter for the board and its subsidiaries. Bord na Gán also regulates the industry and provides a range of supports to the sector, including through the provision of funding for prize money and the allocation of grants to improve amenities at tracks. It is no secret, as has been articulated here already, that the Board has been operating in an extremely difficult financial environment for a number of years now, with the pressures of the recessionary period, reducing total receipts and attendance exacerbated by a very significant debt burden. In 2014, against the background of reducing income for the organisation across a range of headings, my department commissioned an independent report into certain matters relating to Bord na Gán, including its financial performance and prospects. That report by Indicon economic consultants recognised the very difficult situation in which the Board found itself and provided a roadmap for the sustainable development of the greyhound sector. In particular, it recommended a number of asset disposals, which included Harold's Cross Stadium, in order to reduce the debt burden. The report was accepted by Bord na Gán, and I understand that Bord na Gán, having considered the matter and having regard to the recommendations in the Indicon report, has decided to close Harold's Cross Stadium in order to initiate the process of putting it on the market. Its objective is to reduce the financial burden of servicing its debt, with the ultimate view of increasing its capacity to provide support and assistance to the industry. This is very regrettable in the view of the Board. While it is very regrettable, the view of the Board is that there is no other option if the burden of debt on the organisation is to be reduced in any meaningful way. It is clear that this is a very difficult decision for the Board, and of course there is significant opposition to it from the greyhound people, whose views are heartfelt and sincerely held, and I indeed have met them. This is to be expected and is completely understandable. There is a strong cohort of greyhound people, particularly in Dublin, who have a particular association with Harold's Cross Greyhound Stadium. I understand that the intention of the Board is to transfer Harold's Cross racing schedule. It's scheduled to Shelbourne Park, and all staff at Harold's Cross will be offered redeployment. There has been significant government commitment to this sector in recent years, with the contribution of the taxpayer, through the Horse and Greyhound Fund, having received from €10.8 million in 2014 to €16 million in 2017. The greyhound industry would simply not survive without this public funding. However, the Board also has an obligation to improve its own financial standing, and I do not consider it appropriate that this should always involve further recourse to the taxpayer. This is a sector that faces many difficult challenges, not just financial but also regulatory and reputational. I believe that the Board, in very difficult circumstances, is working its way through the issues identified in Indicon and other reports with a view to addressing these issues. I should also say that my department will very shortly be bringing forward legislation to improve the governance and regulation and ultimately the reputation of the sector. I very much look forward to the input of colleagues across the floor to this important exercise.
Thank you, Minister.
I'll just finish. Insofar as Harold's Cross is concerned, and it's an important point to make, Count Cole, if you'll indulge me, any sale will ultimately require the consents of the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. And any specific proposal for its sale will be considered having regard to the Indicon recommendations, the value to be obtained and the need to avoid any further burden on the taxpayer and the need to reduce the significant debt burden.
Thank you, Minister. Now we're really badly over time. I'll ask the deputies to be very brief if they would. Who is first? Deputy Corrin, yes, please.
Thank you for your reply. But I want to go back to the Irish Greyhound Board. They're 20-odd million in debt, and they've now made a decision to sell Harold's Cross, which will only clear a proportion of it. Harold's Cross is a profitable entity in its own right. It doesn't make very much good business sense to sell off something that's making a profit, retaining other elements that are loss-making. The debt that's currently on the books of the Irish Greyhound Board goes back to previous decisions that they made, primarily around the redevelopment of Limerick. And in that regard, I'd ask you to make it known to the Irish Greyhound Board that the prospects of ministerial approval for this disposal are nil. This is a profit-making, and the Irish Greyhound Board need to wake up and come up with a much more viable and proactive business plan, rather than saying the only way out of this is to sell our assets. It is a lazy way, it doesn't address the issues, and if they continue running the same business model without developing the business, then the sale of this will be futile. I'm absolutely opposed to it, and Minister, I'd ask you and your colleagues to make that known at the early stage to the Irish Greyhound Board.
Minister, thank you for your reply. I have to say you're one of the most honourable people in here, but in fairness to your department who supplied you with this, it's the same garbage that your department responded to both myself and others in the PAC last week, and particularly myself and Deputy Peter Burke. It's not really getting to the nub of the issue. It's washing its hands of it, and it's letting down the owners, the breeders, the trainers, and indeed the patrons. There's a fundamental problem here with this organisation and the board and the executive that is running it. It needs to be rooted out and it needs to be dealt with. And your department simply cannot wash its hands of its responsibility. There has been no representative from the department on the board of the Irish Greyhound Board for some time. There is no accountability. And the people I reference, and I very rarely come in here and speak like this, Minister, the people I reference here are not going to stop until they get accountability. And you have an opportunity to ensure that that happens.
Thank you,
and it starts now by taking over this organisation, taking over this board on an interim level, and finding out what has been going on and put in place a plan for the future. The Indicon report is nearly 4 years old.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. We need to conclude. Deputy Kevin O'Keefe, please.
Minister, with all due respects, I would hope that you don't go down the same road as Minister Ross. You are the major shareholder of Bord McGann. You have a big say. The industry is in the crisis stage. A good example is we've seen the prize money sharply reduced down the last number of years. Prize money goes down, attendances go down, and that's where we have the problem. And that's why we need to have the board held more accountable. There must be some bit of mismanagement going on there. Because when you see the prize money reduced by almost by half over the last 5 or 6 years at least, I would ask you that...
Your colleague Deputy Fahy wants to... Deputy Cahill wants to come in.
Thank you, Concora. Minister, I'm a greyhound owner and a director of a greyhound track. Our industry is in serious bother. We have a dispute going on for the last 3 weeks, and the department, as far as I see, are washing their hands of it. Our premier track has had no racing for the last 3 Saturday nights. Last Friday night, 6 dogs was all that turned up to race at the Harold's Cross Card in Shelburne Park. This dispute is doing our industry irreparable damage. We need to get all sides at the table and get discussions going and get racing resumed and get the issue of Harold's Cross and the closure of Harold's Cross and the way it was handled has got to be addressed.
Thank you. Minister, to conclude, please.
Okay. Yeah, look, I appreciate all this. There's a couple of points I'd like to make. I'm as anxious as anybody to let this new legislation get into the committee, so everybody, every stakeholder, every group, including Harold's Cross, will get the opportunity to have their say. Now, the timing of everything, and timing is critical here. I really hope that this can be put in the next couple of weeks into the committee, and I've notified them of the intention so they can plan to have it on their work programme. And we, as in my previous role as chair of the Ag Committee, we did the very same process with the horse racing legislation. There is the board. This is a legacy debt that precedes my time and my 2 predecessors' time as minister and 2 governments. The decision was taken. It was decided that in 2014 proper due diligence wasn't carried over the whole development of Limerick. But that's water under the bridge, unfortunately, and the debt continues. And I do agree with Deputy Corrin and Deputy Kelly about a business plan. I think that has to be the main focus of the organisation. But I would ask people to bear in mind that I answered PQs here a couple of weeks ago, asking, was it fair to put 16 million taxpayers into a declining, which is a fair question. But the background to that was a different agenda. And there are members of this House who have a completely different opinion. And they're not all, from the city or wherever, they're from where you might suspect. So we have to try and get this industry. And I specifically requested to meet the people from Harold's Cross on their own at the outset, and I absolutely feel if there was any decision, any way we could actually not let this happen, I'd be happy to hear it. I think over the course of the discussions on pre-legislative scrutiny, when the construction, and to go back to Deputy Kelly's point about the make-up and the numbers of people on the board and how they will be filled and how their terms will operate, it will be important that there's government, ministerial and departmental presence on that board all the time. Now, they are given regular budgetary updates on their trading position, which actually is quite healthy, but to deal with the legacy debt is going to take a very ambitious plan, and at the moment the only one that seems to be is the report, the recommendations of the Indicon report. Thank you.